I walked into work wearing a suit. My manager said, "Big day." I just smiled, because what she didn't know, I'd been interviewing for her boss's job, and I got it. When I showed up Monday, she was sitting in my old chair. I said, "Let's talk about your performance." I worked under Dana for almost 5 years. She was the kind of manager who didn't yell or throw things or do anything that would get her in trouble with HR. Instead, she did small things that ate at you slowly. She knew how to push just enough so you couldn't point to one thing and say, "This is unfair," but the pattern was always there. It started small. I joined the company as a junior project coordinator. I was eager, a little too eager maybe. I came in early, stayed late, volunteered for things. I thought that's how you moved up. Dana always smiled when I did extra, but never actually gave me credit for it. At first, I thought maybe I was just being sensitive. But then I noticed how she talked to others compared to me. People she liked got included. I got reminders to follow proper channels. People she favored got backed up in meetings. I got told later I should have framed that differently. The comments started around year 2. I'd started wearing nicer clothes, not because of any big reason, just because I wanted to look more professional. I didn't want to stay stuck in the same role forever. The first time I wore a suit, Dana walked by my desk and said, "Interview today?" I laughed it off. The next time it was, "You dressing up for us now?" It became a thing. Every time I wore something a little more polished, she had something to say. At first, I thought she was just making jokes. But after a while, it didn't feel like jokes. It felt like warnings. Every time I asked about advancement, she'd tilt her head like she was trying to be thoughtful and say something vague like, "You're doing fine where you are," or "Let's focus on this quarter first." I did what she said. I focused. I got results. I made fewer mistakes. I kept learning. I documented everything, but nothing changed. One of the breaking points for me was when a colleague with less experience than me got promoted to a role I'd asked about 6 months earlier. When I asked Dana why I hadn't even been considered, she said I wasn't quite there yet and should work on being more visible. That's when I realized I wasn't going to move up if she had anything to do with it. So I changed my approach. I stopped looking to her for approval. I started paying attention to who else had power in the company. Not just titles, but influence. I noticed which senior managers showed up to meetings and actually paid attention. Which ones responded to thoughtful emails. I started building relationships carefully, quietly. I volunteered for the projects no one wanted. The ones that involved cross-department coordination, extra paperwork, late hours. I never complained. I stayed professional. I never threw Dana under the bus. But I also made sure my name was on everything I delivered. I followed up with team leads. I asked for feedback from people outside my department. I started getting noticed slowly. The thing about Dana is she didn't see this happening. She assumed I was still the same guy, just trying too hard and going nowhere. She'd still walk past my desk and say things like, "Still trying to impress?" Or, when I got praise in a meeting, she'd say afterward, "Well, that went better than expected." Then I heard through a contact in finance that the VP of our division was retiring at the end of Q2. I knew that if Dana had anything to do with it, she'd throw her name in and maybe recommend someone else, definitely not me. So I started preparing a full portfolio. I didn't apply right away. I knew the process would be internal and quiet. I focused on aligning myself with the people who would make that decision. I started having lunch with a couple of directors from marketing and operations. I asked questions. I offered help when they needed it. I asked them what they looked for in leadership. I learned fast. I compiled my results, projects led, cost savings, improvements in process. I asked a few people I'd worked with for written feedback, and I used that to build a case. No drama, just the facts. After a few months, I got asked to formally interview. It was quiet. No one on my floor knew, especially not Dana. The interview was with the regional VP, one of the directors I'd worked closely with, and someone from HR. I laid everything out clearly. What I'd done, how I'd grown, where I saw gaps and how I'd address them. A week later, I got the offer. Senior Director, 2 levels above Dana, with decision-making authority over most of her responsibilities. I didn't tell anyone. I wanted to wait until it was official. That Friday, I put on my best suit. Not flashy, just clean, tailored, sharp. Dana walked by me in the morning and said, "Big day." Same smile she always used. I just said, "Yeah." On Monday, I didn't come in through the side door. I used the front entrance, got my new badge, met with HR. They showed me to my office on the executive floor. My name was already printed on the glass door. I spent the morning going through onboarding, reviewing department budgets, and setting up meetings. Around 9:15, I walked down to my old floor. I didn't need to, but I wanted to see it. Dana was at my old desk, filling in because my role hadn't been refilled yet. She looked up surprised. I said, "Let's talk about your performance." She didn't laugh. She just sat there stunned. She'd spent years keeping me small. And now, I had the power she used to hold over me. I wasn't going to throw it in her face. I didn't need to. But I wasn't going to forget it either. After that first Monday, things changed fast. I wasn't just in a new office, I was in a new world. Meetings that used to be closed to me were now scheduled by my assistant. People who barely nodded at me before were suddenly eager to shake my hand, to catch up, to see if we could collaborate. I didn't forget who had been quiet when Dana ignored me. Dana, though, was the real shift. She was still technically a manager, but now she reported to someone who reported to me. And it was clear from day one that she didn't know how to handle it. She avoided eye contact when we passed in the halls. She sent long, overly polite emails with too many bullet points. She CC'd directors she never used a copy. She was nervous. That amused me at first, but the more I watched, the more I realized something else. She was trying to hold on to control. Over the next 2 weeks, I started reviewing her department. Not just her role, everything she touched. I went through the last year's performance reviews, project outcomes, budget use, complaints. There was a pattern. She was really good at managing up and protecting herself, but she was bad at managing people. Turnover was high. 3 solid staff had left in the last year alone. All cited lack of growth or poor communication with management. I asked HR for exit interview summaries. Dana had stalled or blocked multiple training requests. She had quietly killed a mentorship program someone else tried to start. She was protecting her spot by making sure no one could rise behind her. The deeper I looked, the worse it got. Her performance metrics looked fine at first glance, but only because she buried problems or passed the fallout onto junior staff. I knew this behavior. I'd lived under it, but now I had the power to expose it. Still, I wanted to be fair. I scheduled a formal one-on-one. She walked intense, arms crossed, fake smile. She said, "I wasn't sure what to expect from this." I said we were doing performance reviews across departments. Standard stuff. I asked her about some of the turnover. She said people weren't a good fit. I asked about a budget line that had gone over by 22%. She said it was a vendor issue, no accountability, just like always. After that meeting, I kept watching. I didn't act too fast. I wanted it documented. I quietly reassigned one of her direct reports to a different manager on a trial basis. That staffer came to me a week later and said it was the first time she felt safe to ask questions at work. Then Dana started fighting back. She wasn't bold about it. She was subtle, the way she always had been. She'd pull junior staff into her office and check in. I heard from others that she told them I wasn't familiar with how things really worked, or that I meant well but didn't understand the team dynamics. I confronted her once directly and she said, "I'm just trying to protect the team." It got worse. One of the analysts she managed, Jess, a quiet, sharp worker I'd always liked, suddenly put in her notice. Her email said nothing but pursuing new opportunities. I called her that evening. Off the record. She told me Dana had been making her life hell for weeks. micromanaging, blocking tasks, telling her she wasn't aligned with leadership's direction in ways that made it sound like I had said something. Jess didn't want to burn bridges, but she was done. I realized Dana wasn't just defensive. She was trying to sabotage me from inside the ranks, trying to make me look like the problem. I had to be careful. I couldn't fire her on a feeling. She was still protected by company policy, and she knew how to walk that line. I started collecting statements. Quietly, I asked other staff to document their interactions. I pulled archived chat logs and calendar records. Patterns emerged. She had built a system of control so quiet and polished that even HR missed it. But I wasn't HR. I was the one in charge now, and I was done letting her play these games. One morning, a few weeks into all this, I walked into a senior leadership meeting and saw Dana's name on the attendee list. That made no sense. It wasn't her level, and her department wasn't involved in the project we were reviewing. I pulled the meeting notes afterward and saw that she hadn't spoken much, but she'd been invited by one of the directors I'd recently started clashing with over budget reassignments. That's when it hit me. Dana wasn't just playing defense. She was making allies. She'd started positioning herself as someone who had been pushed aside during the restructuring. Quietly, carefully, I found out from another manager over lunch that Dana had hinted she was being excluded from planning conversations because things had changed after I got promoted. I asked him if she said anything more. He shook his head and just said, "She's being careful, but she's definitely building a case." That made me pause, because if she was building a case, it meant she was trying to set something up either for HR or worse, for legal. And I knew from experience, the higher up you go, the more dangerous it is to be sloppy with how you handle things like this. I pulled her last few email threads. Nothing direct, but they all had the same tone, vague references to clarifying expectations, ensuring healthy communication, and other soft, defensible language that made it look like she was the calm one. She was playing a long game. That night, I called a friend who used to work in corporate investigations. I told him everything without giving names. He told me to stop trying to manage it informally. If she's laying breadcrumbs, she's not just trying to protect her job, he said. She's preparing for a war. So I stopped being quiet. I went to HR and laid out everything. Every staff complaint, every quiet exit, every piece of performance data. I didn't push for termination. I asked for an external audit. Independent. Clean. I said I didn't want opinions. I wanted facts. HR agreed, reluctantly. They brought in a third-party consultant to review her management practices, team climate, and department results. Dana didn't know at first. The audit started as a general leadership culture review, but she figured it out quickly. She went on medical leave 2 days after her first interview with the consultant. The note from HR said she was experiencing work-related stress. No return date. I was told not to reach out. I didn't. For 3 weeks, she was gone. But that's when something unexpected happened. An anonymous email went to the CEO's office. It had no name, but it included internal screenshots, Slack messages, emails, calendar notes, cherry-picked and taken out of context. One of the screenshots was from me years ago when I'd vented privately to a coworker about how Dana was shutting doors before I even opened them. Another showed a clipped message I'd written about cutting dead weight, a phrase I had used in a meeting about software systems, not people. It was clear what this was: someone trying to frame me as toxic, as retaliatory, as the problem. The CEO forwarded it to HR and asked for clarity. HR called me in. I stayed calm. I explained every message. I printed the full threads. I walked them through every sentence. Then I asked, "Does this kind of thing usually happen during a stress leave?" They didn't answer, but I could tell they were starting to see the full picture now. I still didn't have hard proof Dana sent that email, but I knew, and I had a feeling things were just getting started. The next time I saw Dana, it wasn't in the office. It was in a mediation room. HR asked for a voluntary check-in meeting once her doctor cleared her to return on a part-time basis. The audit was still ongoing, and she'd technically never been suspended, just out on leave. But the energy had shifted. People were tense. No one smiled much anymore. When she walked into the room, she looked smaller somehow. Her hair wasn't done like usual, and she avoided my eyes. She thanked HR for their time. She spoke softly. She said she just wanted to contribute in a healthy way. She never once said my name, but everything she said was about me. She said she felt targeted, that recent leadership changes had created an unsafe atmosphere, that she'd noticed a pattern of exclusion and intentional undermining. She said these things slowly, with pauses, like she was choosing each word carefully, like they'd been rehearsed. HR asked if she had examples. She brought a folder. It was full of printed emails. Most were harmless. A few were mine, again taken out of context. One where I'd redirected a project to another team without her input. One where I'd asked for her budget breakdown by end of day. She said the tone had been punitive. I didn't get angry. I asked if I could speak. HR nodded. I pulled out a folder of my own. Mine had names, dates, statements, formal complaints from staff who had left, and a few who hadn't. A chart showing team turnover compared to other departments. Screenshots from employees thanking me after being reassigned out of her org. I kept it simple. I said, this isn't about tone. This is about impact. Dana stayed quiet after that. The meeting ended without a resolution. HR said the audit was still being finalized and they'd follow up with both of us separately. But what happened after that surprised me even more. Someone slipped a letter under my door. No name on the envelope, just a piece of paper, typed and signed. It said, Dana has been doing this for years. You're just the first one who got high enough to push back. She crushed someone in marketing in 2019. Another guy left quietly from analytics after she blocked his promotion. Look into those exits. They won't talk unless they know they're protected. I sat there holding that paper for a long time. I'd thought she just didn't like me. That maybe I'd reminded her of someone or I rubbed her the wrong way. But this wasn't personal anymore. It was a pattern. A quiet one. Spread out over years. Different departments. Different names. All left quietly. None of it ever documented together. Until now. I had the job. I had the access. And now I had the reason. So I started digging deeper. I spent the next 2 weekends going through archive files at home. Old org charts. Exit memos. Project notes from before I ever got promoted. Every time someone left under Dana, there was a pattern. The roles never got replaced quickly. The teams around them shifted. Budgets got absorbed. Projects were quietly restructured. It was like she erased people after they left, and no one questioned it because no one connected the dots. But I saw it clearly now. She didn't just block growth, she removed threats. She made people feel like leaving was their own idea. I found 4 former employees who fit the pattern. I reached out, carefully. One never answered. One said, please don't contact me again. But 2 others agreed to talk, off the record. Both said nearly the same thing. Dana had praised them in public, then undermined them in private. Shifted credit, denied training. Then when they pushed back, she gave them warnings, subtle, not formal. Maybe this isn't the right place for you long term. You might be better suited elsewhere. They left before things got worse. Neither ever filed a complaint. They didn't think anyone would believe them. I asked if they'd be willing to give written statements if HR gave them legal protection. One of them said yes. The other said she'd think about it. I took that to legal. At first, they hesitated. They didn't want to mess. But once I showed them the anonymous letter, the employee turnover data, and how this tied to our audit, they took it seriously. They asked to handle things from there. And they did. 3 weeks later, Dana was placed on administrative leave. HR didn't say it publicly, but the rumor spread fast. People whispered. Some were confused, some looked relieved. A junior staff member in marketing pulled me aside and said, I didn't think anyone would ever stand up to her. That stuck with me. Another 2 months passed. Legal wrapped up their investigation. HR met with me privately. Dana had been found in violation of multiple leadership policies. Not one big thing, but years of manipulation, retaliation, and obstruction. She wasn't getting fired outright, but she was being offered a transition package with a confidentiality clause. Clean exit. No lawsuit. I said, so she gets to walk away? HR said she doesn't get to come back. That didn't feel like enough at first. After everything, part of me wanted her dragged out of the building, badge revoked, her name wiped from the system. But instead, it was quiet, just like she'd always been. A few people noticed she was gone. A few said she was always tough but smart. Most moved on. I didn't announce anything. I didn't brag. I didn't change my walk or start dressing louder. I kept showing up, same time every day. I led meetings. I gave credit. I asked questions. And slowly the team changed. People spoke more, asked for more, pitched new ideas. A few who'd been quiet started growing. One of the interns she used to ignore now runs her own team. The coordinator who replaced me, he just got promoted last month. As for me, I stayed. I could have left for a better offer once all this blew over. But I didn't want to. Not yet. I built something here. Not just revenge. Not just survival. I proved I could rise, even when someone tried to keep me buried. And now I make sure no one else has to go through what I did. Not on my watch. The best revenge? I became everything she tried to stop me from being, and now she's gone. And I'm still here.